Hello again and welcome. This is Patricia Lucia, author of Wildflowers and Present Tenses, a memoir. And today we're going to jump into step 5, how to start a story. Now, you all may remember being taught in school the progression of a story. It looked something like a pyramid. You had the introduction of the setting and the characters, and then the conflict, and then you had the rising action, and then you had the climax, and then you had the falling action that went to finally the resolution, how the conflict was resolved in the end. So it's a bit like a pyramid. We're not going to do that. Most writers and storytellers don't really tell a story like that. What is more popular is starting a story in the middle. In the writing community, that's called in medias res, and it just means in the middle of the story. You may see examples of this in movies and in films where you begin the movie and it's in the middle of the action. And then through a series of flashbacks, the backstory gets filled in. And so this particular way of writing a story is actually very effective because you're getting the reader into the action and the conflict of the story right away. Let's just say that the story that you're writing of your life, hypothetically, is a story about how you were born into a cult and eventually got out of that cult. That's a very compelling story, isn't it? I would be interested in reading that story. But how do you begin the story? Do you begin the story with your birth into this situation and how your family functioned within this cult? I wouldn't. I would begin on the day when somehow you managed to step out into the world free of that cult and what that first day was like, what you were thinking, what you went through, what you had to do to get there. That's really compelling. And then at some point, you let the reader know that what has just happened is that you have escaped a cult you were born into. Wow. And then you can fill in the backstory with flashbacks as you move forward in telling the story about your free life, your newly free life. Think about the stories that you want to write. Can you begin them in the middle? And what would the middle be? I'll give you an example from my memoir. So, in the story, She Was Always a Gentleman, it begins with a crisis moment when I am in crisis about my sexuality and I'm desperate to talk to someone. So it begins with, "Tell me more about that kiss." A quote from a teacher that I was confiding in who turned out to be exactly the wrong kind of person to talk to. So, and then it goes on from there. I have mostly begun my stories using in medias res, and I find that that has been very compelling. It draws the reader in right away. In Tasting the Ocean, I write, "I'm on the 10:30 Amtrak to Springfield and I'm thinking about my mother, my lover, and a woman in my writing class whose name I can't remember, but whose face comes back to me from time to time whenever I travel to my hometown. I will call her Brett." And this happens to be on the morning when I'm very conflicted about traveling home to Springfield when I would rather spend time with my lover. So here I could go on with examples, but if you observe movies, look at how they begin. Look at how the storytelling in movies and film happens. It often begins in the middle. Sometimes you'll even find that it begins at the end and you learn the story through a whole series of flashbacks. So I encourage you to think about that pivotal moment in a story. And I urge you to consider starting your story at the pivotal moment and then filling the reader in on what brought you to that pivotal moment. I also want to say a little bit about writing every day or writing regularly. If you have a list of the stories that you want to write, one of the ways to keep writing daily, if that's what you've chosen, every other day, if that's what you've chosen, is to allow yourself to jump from one story to another. Let's say you've been writing one story and you kind of come to a place where you're not really sure where you want to go next, but oh, it's that morning where you're supposed to write 250 words or 300 words. If you can't bring yourself to write about that story, then jump to another story and begin writing there. So you can, because you have your list of stories that you want to write, you can work on several simultaneously so that you keep moving your word count forward. You can leave aside one unfinished story and begin writing another and then return to it. So you just keep moving things forward. So I hope this has been helpful. Think of the stories that you want to tell. Find a pivotal moment in those stories and try beginning there. Hope this has been helpful. I'll see you next time for developing compelling characters.